Welcome to a special TRM Talks. TRM Talks is brought to you by TRM Labs, the leading provider of blockchain intelligence and anti-money laundering software. This morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, the U.S. Treasury Department announced economic sanctions against cryptocurrency mixer Tornado Cash for its use by North Korea's cybercriminals and other illicit actors who have used the service for years to launder the proceeds of hacks and other financial crime. Today, I am joined by exactly who you want to hear from in the wake of these sanctions against Tornado Cash. Aaron Arnold, Senior Associate Fellow with the Center for Financial Crime and Security Studies, RUSI, former UN expert on North Korea. Tom Armstrong, Compliance Advisor at TRM Labs, former compliance and financial crime guru at Goldman Sachs. Mario Cosby, former FBI and expert on terrorist financing. And finally, Rita Martin, former Secret Service agent and mixing specialist. Thank you all so much for joining me today to mix things up a little bit on a really busy Monday in August. Really, thank you so much. Before we delve right in, and we don't have a ton of time today, we're just going to kind of try to get in what we can. If you can just sort of go around the room and really do a lightning round of intros, it's just for folks to sort of know who the experts are that they're hearing from. Rita, why don't I kick that off with you?
Thanks, Ari. Rita Martin, member of our global investigations team, also working on building out our training mission to include TRM Academy. So really passionate about going over these kinds of categories and teaching folks all about how mixers and other attempts at privacy on chain work.
Awesome. And I was just telling Rita, she's breaking TRM Talks records today, 2 TRM Talks in 3 business days. And one thing that's so cool and so interesting is that there was so much in the chat, the Q&A, when we did our first TRM Talks investigations on Thursday about Tornado Cash in particular. And today we're going to today it's now sanctioned by OFAC, and we're going to be talking about it. Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks,
Ari. You are as I think of sort of like when you need someone on North Korea, I really go to one of 2 people, Aaron Arnold or Nick Carlson. So
I go to Nick. So, Ari, pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Aaron Arnold. As Ari mentioned, I'm a senior associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, where I lead our work on counterproliferation finance and sanctions implementation. And prior to that, I was the U.S. member on the UN panel of experts. For those that aren't familiar, this is the group that investigates North Korean sanctions violations and then reports them to the Security Council. So, every time you hear on the news, nightly news, it's like, according to a new UN report, North Korea, did something nefarious. That's what I was responsible for doing. I wrote that report.
and we are going to get deep into that today. Mario, you're up.
Yeah, greetings everyone. Mario Cosby here on TRM Labs. I'm on the primary intelligence team. My primary focus is looking at sanctions and terrorist financing. So establishing those programs here at TRM on how we're responding to that risk and update our customers with it, with that information. But looking forward to this conversation.
Mario, thank you so much. And finally, TRM Talks vet, Tom Armstrong. Just a quick intro.
Thanks, Ari. As Ari mentioned, compliance advisor, helping institutions figure out what to do when we have something like a new kind of groundbreaking sanctions designation as they build out their compliance programs, but spent the last 9+ years at Goldman Sachs in their financial crime compliance department.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Look, Rita, I know we have a sophisticated audience here, but I'm getting a ton of questions today, even around sort of, well, what is Tornado Cash? What is a mixing service? And really, how is it different than some of these other sort of mixers out there that we've heard about over the years? So if you could just kind of give us a little bit of a primer on Tornado Cash and how we should be thinking about it as an entity.
Mixers generally aim to break the on-chain relationship between a deposit and a withdrawal. Tornado Cash is unique in that up until about July of 2021, there were these set denominations that you could deposit into the protocol. So our friend Nick Furneaux, who wrote Investigating Cryptocurrencies, he kind of has this analogy. 100 people put $100 in 100 identical bags. One of them just so happens to be a criminal, and we see them put the money in the bag. 100 friends can come in and take any of those bags, and we don't know which is the criminals, right? That's essentially like a very, very basic explainer of how Tornado Cash works. It's a similar mechanism to Zcash. Mixer actually is a bit misleading. It's more of an obfuscator. But Tornado Cash's own website actually encourages you to use it in what's considered a proper way, right? This idea of deposit, wait, and withdrawal. And when we do training, we talk about how any on-chain activity at the end of the day is on some level human behavior, right? And what's one portion of that three-step process that humans are pretty terrible at? It's the waiting part. So I know we're going to get into more of this a little bit later, but it's been interesting to see the different mechanisms in which law enforcement specifically has had successful attempts at exploiting the uniqueness of Tornado Cash, whether it's through relayers or some other unique functionalities. But that is at its most basic level, attempting to use these pools where you deposit your funds to break that on-chain relationship between the deposit and the withdrawal.
Rita, thank you so much. And look, I mean, I think for folks just at home, sort of a little additional context, right? This is not the first time that the US government has focused on sort of cryptocurrency mixers, right? Like just in May, the Treasury Department, in a very similar designation, designated Blender.io, a much sort of smaller volume-wise mixing service that was also used by North Korea cyber criminals to launder funds in the Ronin hack and other hacks. But it's really not even just Treasury, right? DOJ has brought criminal actions against what I'd sort of call darknet advertising mixers like Helix and Bitcoin Fog for money laundering conspiracy, because those entities were conspiring with Alpha Bay and other darknet markets to do just what Rita described, to obfuscate transactions, but for the purpose of obfuscating the flow of illicit funds. And, obviously mixing services has been a target, but Tornado Cash is different because it's bigger. And we're really just sort of talking about the scale. Is that kind of fair to say here, why this is such a huge deal, Rita?
Yeah, we're going to get into some numbers here in a second, but the size of Tornado and just the kind of usability of it, I think is really what sets it apart. In fact, Vitalik himself has been quoted saying that one of the reasons why it's so popular is that it kind of already fits into your existing workflow. So that's true for bad actors as well as illicit actors.
Terrific. Yeah, no, thank you so much. Do you want to sort of delve into some of those numbers, or do you want to sort of talk numbers, Rita? Sort of what are we seeing out there?
Yeah, so what we have been settling on specifically in relation, and I'm not going to steal your thunder by any means, Aaron, but what we have been settling on specifically related to North Korea is right around 900 million. So this is going to look a little bit different depending on some parameters, like, if you're tracking time or value at time of theft, or if you are able to actually make those connections 1 or 2 hops out. Anyone who's done a trading class with me knows that this idea of hops is a bit of a problematic term. I won't cover that right now in this short call, but right now related to North Korea, we are looking at 900 million being sent through the protocol, known kind of hacked or stolen funds.
That's really helpful too. And even just sort of what hacks are you willing to associate directly with North Korea at this time, right? Like the FBI has made clear that there are certain hacks like Ronin, but there are a lot of others out there that have a lot of the indicia that I know Aaron will kind of dig into. Mario, your role is so cool, and we've sort of seen it play out really over the last few hours at TRM. Is sort of once a sanction designation hits, you are following this like the box scores, right? Like this is your Super Bowl. What are you then doing for customers in terms of ensuring that the tool has what it needs to mitigate risk for our clients?
No. I feel like I thought we had a break for a little bit from OFAC during designations.
It's August, right?
Yeah, it's August. We had a little bit of a spring, beginning of summer break, and now we're back at it again. But no, it's been a very fun past few hours for myself as we look at the sanctions designation. We put a lot of effort into providing an accurate risk picture for our customer here when we see sanctions, and then also ongoing relation to sanctions. We monitor several different sanctions lists. We do this in real time because we want to provide that accurate picture so that way we can update our systems with the most up-to-date information. With the monitoring of this, as I said before, we monitor several different lists, even though we've only seen crypto addresses be designated by 2 countries, that's the US and the UK. So we do this because as we see crypto become more and more prevalent in the space over time, we're expecting new sanctions to be added to other sanctions lists. So we provide our customers with that capability. As we look at the identification of crypto addresses on sanctions lists, so like today with Tornado Cash, we not only look at and target those specific addresses that are sanctioned by OFAC, but we try and expand more because in this inherent nature of the blockchain, an entity can have many different addresses. All right, OFAC might not have all the addresses or have all the intelligence that TRM has. All right, so we provide our customer with that extra intelligence, meaning that not only will we sanction the addresses in our platform that are sanctioned on that OFAC sanction list, but we will actually target the entity that's controlling those addresses. In that effort, we saw Tornado Cash controlling different addresses outside of the list. So we provided our customers with that accurate picture of providing that sanctions labeling there. And then as we look forward and we go on, we're going to continue to have investigations looking at, hey, how's the space going to change in the future? Is Tornado Cash going to go to something else or sort of establish new addresses? All right, we have a team of threat hunters here at TRM that are great at what they do. Nick Carlson's one of them. But we're going to continue to monitor to see where they're going after that. So that way we can apply that sanctions tagging to those new addresses if they do come about. But we do this with any other sanctioned entity. I like Southfront is one that was done last year for Russian disinformation. They continued to set up new addresses after they were designated, and we were on it right after they set up those new addresses. So it's an ongoing fight. I always look at it once a designation happens, it's just the beginning, and we're going to continue to keep targeting it and follow it wherever it goes.
Just sort of building on that, I think you said it all there, but like just kind of digging in a little bit. Like I love the inside baseball, right? Like what I watched this morning, quite honestly, of from 10:30 really till now, and probably I've just stolen 30 minutes of your life, and you're going to go right back to it. But like, you move so quickly because you know that like immediately clients are going to have exposure to risk. What are you doing in those moments where that list pops? And you want to ensure that our clients out there are covered.
Yeah, I call it the 2 C's: coordinate and communicate. As you guys kind of see, this plays out across multiple different spectrums. I sit on a primary intelligence team. Like I look and actively seek for this type of information. But when it comes down to an engineering perspective, it comes down to a marketing perspective. A lot of different parts play out. So coordination, communication, I feel like it is key. I've been at my desk the entire time, talking to you, Ari, talking to folks on our marketing team, talking to people setting up our risk engine and updating our risk engine. So it's been a fun-filled day, and then preparing for this also. So it's
awesome.
been a great time.
Well, thank you so much for taking even a few minutes. There's a question in the chat that I've been getting a lot today, and frankly, for months. We were even talking about it before we jumped on. Anyone can also sort of jump on and handle it. But the question is sort of, what are the legitimate use cases of mixers, particularly as sort of Rita described? Like, look, I mean, it's intended to obfuscate the flow of funds, to anonymize transactions. Look, I mean, I think that as we sort of move into a new financial system where more and more transactions occur on an open ledger in this sort of open democratic way, I think there's going to be more and more reasons why people are going to want to have sort of, keep some of that private. Sort of very much in the same way we want to keep our finances private. But what I think OFAC is saying today is essentially, look, even if you are doing a lot of legitimate business like Tornado Cash, that you have to have controls in place to stop bad actors from taking advantage of your protocol. And that is different. It's consistent with what OFAC has said before, certainly, but it's a little bit more forward-leaning than what we've seen before. Aaron, you are here to sort of really give us that sort of expert context. When I was a prosecutor, we were looking at North Korea and money laundering cases, right? Like they are an early adopter of using crypto to launder funds. And look, this designation isn't a straight up DPRK designation today, a Lazarus Group designation, but it is clear that Tornado Cash is being sanctioned for allowing it to become the go-to mixing service for Lazarus Group and North Korea actors. to give us a little perspective on sort of why crypto, why North Korea, sort of what should we understand here?
Yeah, thanks, Ari. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone's kind of aware, largely due to both unilateral, like U.S. sanctions, as well as international sanctions, like those imposed by the UN Security Council. North Korea is largely a very cash-strapped regime, right? Unable to really transact in a very legitimate way in global trade and commerce. So in light of this, they resort to a lot of revenue generating activities. And one of those activities is through cryptocurrency. Now, it's a country that's not buying cryptocurrency like, let's say, a retail investor would, but it's more or less along the lines of stealing cryptocurrency, right? And so this theft of crypto then obviously requires some sort of mechanism to launder it, to turn it into a usable form to further support their ballistic missile and WMD program. Sorry, go ahead, Ari.
No. That's absolutely right. Just give me a feel, sort of, look. We've seen over, look, North Korea has used crypto for laundering funds and then has sort of targeted cryptocurrency businesses for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. It feels like maybe in the wake of Ronin for 600 million plus, right, that things have escalated in some way. Is there an escalation, or is this just sort of something continued that's sort of going on here?
Well, so I think it was about in 2019 when the UN panel of experts first started to report on North Korea's kind of crypto activities. It's definitely increased since then. I think a lot of this has to do with COVID and sort of the global shutdown in trade and commerce. Prior to COVID, some of the key revenue generating activities that North Korea, engaged in were illegal overseas labor, narcotics trafficking, restaurants, massage parlors, like these sort of Eastern medicine medical centers, right? There's kind of this whole range of just revenue generating activities. But if you are prohibited then from traveling, right? If your travel is restricted, this is kind of a great opportunity for North Korea. They see it as low-hanging fruit, all right? In the sense that they don't really have to leave the couch in some ways to hack a virtual asset service provider and abscond with tens of millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency. Now, that's not to say that they actually get that amount. For each of these hacks, and there's a mechanism there that requires sort of the VIG, right? Like to kind of wash that money into a usable that crypto into a usable format. But from their perspective, again, this is sort of low hanging fruit. It's largely a result of lax security protocols. Really, continued sort of lax, rules and regulation in various jurisdictions. So there's a fair amount of sort of regulatory arbitrage that North Korea can exploit, especially in terms of cybersecurity practices. And so, I suspect that this, because success begets success, North Korea will continue these activities, at least in the short and medium term.
Sure. Sort of sticking with this tornado cash for a moment. Something that TRM is reporting today based on analysis is that we've seen about $1 billion move through tornado cash by DPRK actors, and that tornado cash has been used by DPRK in its 10 largest hacks, essentially. Mm-hmm. I would definitely tell folks, I don't think it's in the handouts, but the Center for New American Studies, CNAS, TRM, in collaboration with TRM, did a terrific report pre-Ronin on sort of the major North Korea hacks, and talks about the way that North Korea uses mixing services. If you could just talk a little bit about sort of the way North Korea thinks about laundering funds, right? It's a little different than, a traditional hacker, because the stakes are different, right? You're not getting arrested if you're North Korea, or if you're a North Korean cyber actor, and maybe you're sort of a little bit more brazen. But maybe talk us through a little bit of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, just as you said, right? There's really, so what if you get caught? What are they going to do? North Korea is not extraditing anyone from North Korea. China's probably not extraditing anyone from China either. So at the end of the day, you're sort of in the situation where, if you're able to launder 10 million, that's great. If you're able to launder 5,000, well, that's icing on the cake as well, right? There's sort of no harm, no foul. Well, there's a harm and foul.
Well, it's a great point, because this is why these types of actions against the money laundering concern, right? Like like Tornado Cash becomes so important, because you cannot take action necessarily, short of kinetic action, against North Korea directly. And so this becomes, how do you stop the laundering? I think that's a terrific point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I think a lot of the U.S. efforts, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, have really focused on those sort of pinch points, especially in the crypto community. Essentially where the rubber meets the road, right? What are the services that are providing, anonymity or the ability of North Korea to obscure its activities? Where are the points that North Korea or those acting on behest of North Korea can off-ramp crypto into the formal or legitimate financial system, right? And so that then becomes sort of the crucial strategy to chip away at North Korea's ability to generate revenue, for its ballistic missile and nuclear weapon systems. And I just want to point out real quick that even just today, there was an article released by AP News that the upcoming UN report shows that North Korea is in the process of preparing for its 7th nuclear test. Right, they have been testing spark gaps and other types of related equipment. Right, so this is not a sort of theoretical treatment of cryptocurrency. Right, this has real implications. Shutting down Tornado Cash prevents North Korea from generating the revenue that it needs to facilitate those activities. Right?
Yeah, really good point. And Tom, you're going to take us home with really sort of getting us into the minds of compliance officers today and into those meetings. But real quick. I often forget, I think it probably bears some explanation around sort of what is sanctions and who do they impact. And there's a question in the chat that kind of goes to that. And the bottom line, is what this means is that U.S. persons and U.S. entities are prohibited from doing business with Tornado Cash, as of this morning. Now, you ultimately get the question, does this affect foreign persons and foreign entities? And the answer is not directly, right? But what it does do is sort of name and shame Tornado Cash in a way that we may see sort of even foreign actors, non-U.S. persons, non-U.S. entities move away from using the service. And I think that what we've seen from SUEX and ChatX and GrandTex, these cryptocurrency businesses, Russia-based non-compliant exchanges, is that we saw just that. We saw the volume drop precipitously, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tornado Cash. But to the question in the chat, essentially sanctions are prohibitions against U.S. persons, and they're blocking funds or property in the U.S. Of the entity. All right, Tom. Arguably, the most important piece of this whole thing is, as a compliance professional, sort of what's the war room today, right? Like, how are you thinking about this? How do you approach this? Because, the real reason why Tornado Cash is different is it's bigger and there are more addresses and it's going to affect more folks. Could you walk us through how you're thinking about this as a compliance officer today?
Yeah, that's the really interesting angle here, is that even though there's a North Korean catalyst to the designation, all kinds of institutions in the U.S. may have some level of exposure, even though they have no exposure to North Korea, obviously. And so, typically when, I'm reminded of bigger announcements when I was back at Goldman Sachs, like Pandora Papers, Panama Papers, those type of things. And that first step is really key in terms of an exposure analysis, right? So, Mario mentioned the tools that we use at TRM Labs. And it's really important, I think, for financial institutions, crypto exchanges, or really anyone operating in the kind of transmission of digital assets, to do that exposure analysis to see if they have Tornado Cash connectivity. Again, the tricky thing here, and it raises interesting kind of enforcement and legal questions, is, no one's banking, so to speak, a smart contract that provides mixing services. But what do you do about that indirect exposure, right? It's not totally clear. I'll just call out, an enforcement action from OFAC from 2014 involving an entity called Clearstream, where Clearstream was providing security services. It was a Luxembourg entity providing security settlement services, and they had a bank account for the Central Bank of Iran. In the kind of process of the settlement, there were omnibus accounts at a U.S. financial institution. And essentially, it's a really interesting case where OFAC was making the case that even though the kind of direct exposure was outside of kind of US territories, there was indirect exposure through the chain of kind of ownership, because the account for the Central Bank of Iran had interest property in bonds. And so again, it raises really interesting questions from the digital asset space about if your customers have indirect exposure to Tornado Cash, what do you do? Maybe it doesn't rise to the level of making a voluntary exposure to OFAC, but certainly undertaking that assessment and firming up, whether you do or do not have exposure, or what that exposure looks like, I think is a really key first step. I think that also relates, and just to call back, OFAC released guidance in October of last year on virtual currency, and it's a fantastic document. Really lays out the groundwork of what everyone should be doing in this space to kind of mitigate the risk of sanctions exposure. But one of the really key things is a risk assessment. It can't be a kind of well, we only have legal entities in this country, and so that's our exposure. It's got to be robust, fulsome, and thoughtful to think about where you have customers, what are the different IP address data points that you may be taking in, and then that's the most important step, because it should inform the rest of your control environment. Things like, how often do you screen after onboarding? Should you screen daily, weekly, quarterly? What types of tools do you need in order to really round out your control environment? The risk assessment should really inform a lot of that control design that institutions should undertake. So again, this is a really interesting case to think about. If we do have indirect exposure, what do we do? But it'll be interesting to see this play out.
I love this, because you sort of go back to the guidance, which is really, I think people should, to some extent, if you're a compliant exchange or sort of a VASP in the space, you should already be essentially doing yesterday what you should now be doing today. And that is, just like you said, you go through that guidance. You should have transaction monitoring like TRM. You should be doing geolocation. You should be doing risk assessments and having compliance professionals and management buy-in and all these things, right? That 24 hours don't really necessarily change. But at the same time, like, this is a big one, and there's going to be a lot of kind of interesting fallout here for sure. There was a question in the chat on just real quick on numbers, and that is sort of, what is the best guess on percentage of illicit activity? I can say, look, I mean, Treasury says that they're seeing that they believe about 7 billion has been laundered through Tornado Cash since 2019. So I don't have it in front of me, but you figure out what volume Tornado Cash has done. I think it's in TRM did a pretty in-depth blog post on Tornado Cash today that's in the handouts where we go into those numbers. But I think that's actually not a really tough one to come up with. And the answer is a lot. I think it's a lot. And I think that's why we saw the action we did today. I interrupted someone who was going.
Sorry. I was just going to say quickly, Ari, to call back to the tools that Mario talked about. Sanctions exposure in the digital asset space is a little bit of a different ballgame, right? As Mario kind of mentioned, there's different ways that we can surface the risk here. It's not just direct account exposure, which is what most traditional financial institutions will be used to, right? There's the ability to see whether there's counterparty exposure or, again, kind of indirect exposure. And so, again, that just takes a lot of thinking through and thought process for people to think, how do we actually mitigate that downstream or upstream risk exposure that we may have?
Terrific. And another question in here around sort of sanctions screening capabilities for TRM in particular. Obviously, there's sort of a full suite of blockchain analytics tools that we sort of went into that OFAC expects from crypto businesses. We also offer sort of right on the heels of the invasion of Ukraine, offered a free sanction screening tool, which is easily accessible through our website. Quite frankly, just to ensure that everyone is at a minimum screening for sanctions today, whether you're the largest exchange or the smallest DeFi protocol, that you have the capability. So yes, we offer a range of different tools, including a free sanction screening product. In the last 2 minutes, we'll do like a lightning round or something. I know there was some conversation around like how enforceable this is. Aaron, you wanted to give us like a quick take on that, and anyone else feel free to jump in on anything else that's out there for them.
Oh, listen, I think that in addition to Tom's comments, I think that sort of a key question, especially in the sort of the more policy domain, is what are the core challenges around enforcement, especially for distributed applications, going forward? What is this going to look like? So I think that this is one of the more interesting and novel aspects of this OFAC designation against Tornado Cash, right? Is that there's really no one person in charge that you can send, a fine, right, or a search warrant to in this context, right? So rules and regulations are going to need to catch up in some appreciable way. And so, what does that mean? There also sort of needs to be I think a discussion at the international level, especially among the Financial Action Task Force, as it continues to work on updating its anti-money laundering, terrorist financing recommendations, and how those work within the crypto space. But I'll just conclude and say that this is, in my view, this is a very significant designation. I think that it does chip away at North Korea's ability to obfuscate its ill-gotten gains. I will just close with the reminder that North Korea is a very entrepreneurial and a very resilient country. And if it's not tornado cash, it will be something else. And so I think that, from my perspective, then law enforcement, national authorities need to be on the lookout and aware for what that sort of evolution is going to look like.
We are going to leave it there because we're out of time, and that's an amazing place to leave it.
I'm sorry.
But, it's perfect, that forward-looking. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, I mean, North Korea has used every trick in the book to launder funds over the years and evade sanctions, and crypto is sort of only the latest iteration of that. Thank you all so much for joining me on such crazy short notice and providing your expertise. We're going to be talking a ton about this and sort of providing as much insights and frankly guidance as we can to cryptocurrency businesses and financial institutions on how to sort of deal with this round of sanctions from OFAC. Subscribe to the weekly roundup. It's awesome. There's going to be a ton of tornado related stuff in there this week. Follow us on social media, and looking forward to sort of seeing you all on another TRM Talks soon. Until then, thank you for helping us build a safer financial system. Have a great day, everybody.